Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rich Sutter, and we are in the zone. My ride or die partner, Pete Coles, is in the house with us today. MV Pete, Pistol Pete. He's got two nicknames already.
I know,
And
huh?
we'll be working towards a third. We'll
I
be
just call
working
you
towards
Coach.
a third. Everybody calls me Coach. Sometimes I just go into places just to kind of have fun, and I look at people that have seen me for a long time and just kind of know me and kind of go by, hey, Coach, how you doing? Hey, Coach. And we get away with this in the business a lot because coaches don't know nobody's name either. And we hey, Coach, how you doing? Good. So I just go in every once in a while and I say, what's my first name? And I just let it sit there for a minute. And nobody ever knows. Nobody ever knows. It's okay. It's okay. Sometimes it's okay to be known for what you are rather than who you are. Let's just lay it out at that. Feed 'em fish, Pete. We're going right into it. I wanted to go feed 'em fish today. I wanted to just give a brief shout out to a friend of mine, Miss Donna Sesti. Had a brief setback health-wise this week. Is down at Bay State recuperating and doing really, really well. I just wanted to take this first segment to wish her well, let her know that everybody here in Westfield is pulling for her, and that we really, really are praying for her and hope for a speedy recovery. So God bless you, and we hope that you recover very, very well.
That's the family behind Emma's, right?
That's the Emma's
Yep,
family.
okay, yep.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's John Paul, it's Emma, and it's Lauren with some grandchildren thrown in there now. Baby Mila's cute, and all the other ones thrown in. They're just really like family to me. So it was very. I went into the restaurant last night. I caught the news, and I'll be down to see you soon, Donna. But you hang in there, all right? I know that hospital food's not as good as Emma's, but you hang right in there. All right, so we want to start off with that. It's one of the things I love about this show is we just get to keep it local sometimes and really talk to the people of the community about what's going on in the community. But today, Pete, we're coming out NCAA college basketball. The campuses are loaded right now.
Yep.
Everybody's here. There's an excitement brewing all around. There's football games going on. It's a really, truly cool time of year. Freshmen are walking around campus kind of in a trance.
Wide-eyed.
Just having transitioned from the big man and the big person on campus to, oh, my God, I got to start over. Here I am at the bottom of the ladder. And you have your sophomores, back for a second year, and sophomore, they're the sophist part of sophomore is the wisdom. They're hoping for more wisdom, and that's what we're hoping for all of our students. Obviously, the third and fourth year, just really, really getting ready for career preparation and starting to do internships, and all that's really, really exciting, layered over the college basketball season, which is upon us. John Rothstein, I think it was the other day, he tweeted out, we are 60 days from college basketball season. And that was the other day, so we're under the 60 mark, and that's good with me. Something that's occurred also is the NCAA has loosened the restrictions around practice, so some of the teams are already practicing in Division I and II. And if you're interested in some Division III practices that might be open to the public, they'll have 8 practices prior to October 15th, which is a first-time pilot being run by the NCAA right now. They're going to allow 8 practices prior to the start of the season that they normally didn't allow. So we're excited about that. I did get a question during the week. Pete and I talked about it before the show, and I wanted to allude to it, and I wanted to answer it. Somebody asked me, dead seriously, who does our makeup on the show?
Well, you have that healthy glow. I'm hearing under the fluorescence.
Well, I appreciate that, Pete, the healthy glow comment, but Pete really does my makeup digitally. If I'm looking a little pale, he can tighten me up a little bit. So I'm very, very fortunate. But to be honest with you, if you see Pete every once in a while, what I do is I come in and I drop 2 Mountain Dews, one on his desk and one on mine. We drop half of a Mountain Dew. It raises the blood pressure just a tiny little bit, which creates a nice little rosy glow around the cheeks. So we're not makeup people. We don't have makeup people. We don't have hair people. We have me and Pete, and that's what we do. And so today we are going to spend the entire hour, and it is going to go fast, people. So pay attention. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but we're going to spend the entire hour on the upcoming college basketball season. What's it look like? What's the excitement and the buzz around some of the teams that are there? We'll talk a little bit about Jeff Goodman's top 25, which we didn't get to in a previous show. I think he does a really, really good job. I like Jeff Goodman. There's some mixed feelings about him out there. I think he's really into it, and he really lives basketball. And for me, that's good. But we'll get into that a little bit later. What I wanted to talk about right now was I'm going to look for it, but we alluded to this in our conference realignment part last week when we talked about the Feed 'em Fish portion. And in the Feed 'em Fish portion, we alluded to the conference realignment that's going on right now. That's dizzying, and it's absolutely death-defying to try and keep up with. I went away from the computer, Pete. I'm back to all paper today. But what I wanted to do...
Some of it doesn't even make sense, except in the dollar sign department.
That's where it makes sense. That's where it makes sense every day of the week and twice on Sunday, as we say here in the zone. But what I wanted to allude to was they're now this is now blowing up. This is now creating situations where, and I'm going to read from this a little bit because I thought it was really interesting. This is Pete Thamel from ESPN, and he is reporting on the fact that some teams in the conferences that just got poached have now went to a federal judge and asked for a restriction on the board of that conference from meeting. I'm going to read it to you because it's gotten there now. A state judge in Washington granted a temporary restraining order Monday to prevent the Pac-12 conference from meeting as a board later that week.
How can you...
Judge Gary Libby ruled in favor of Oregon State and Washington State in Whitman County Superior Court after they jointly filed a complaint Friday that saw the potential of the Pac-12 meeting as a board and voting as an imminent and existential threat to the future of the conference. I'll read that last part again. It's lawyerly, but it's...
Right, no, I got it, yeah.
It's pretty powerful. Imminent and existential threat to the future of the conference. Their board, by just meeting, would be an existential threat. And the funny piece is the judge agreed. The judge agreed, gave him the restraining order. And so this is going to go back and forth. And really what you have is going to be some allegations, I believe, that there's some fraud that has gone on in these exchanges. Okay, let me explain a little bit of what I mean by that. You're offering something as a product, fully knowing that the product wasn't what you were offering. They knew the changes were coming. They're representing their new television package as one thing, and when it's going to be something completely different into the future. And so I think that's where we're going to see a lot of these lawsuits come. And also, when you say something's an existential threat, I don't know if that applies to organizations. You know, is the Pac-12 capable of receiving an existential threat? I'm unsure of that, but the judge agreed with it.
Well,
the judge agreed with it. So
existential threat, I guess, to their finances, which would be an existential threat to the organization because it would ruin their finances. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I thought we lived in a capitalist society.
I thought we did too, but I'm looking at current developments, and I'm going, well, maybe not so much.
I'm just shocked. I'm just shocked by some of the things that come out of
But
court.
sometimes a judge will grant an injunction just to see if the merits of the case warrant. Like, hey, you might not have a case, but I want to review it.
100%.
Right.
100%. It's a temporary restraining order, but it does stop them from meeting.
Well, because they would go through with the realignment.
And
right, they would vote on the realignment.
This isn't the first conference realignment that's occurred. The Pac-12 is not new kid to the block here. Conferences have been rated up and down the boulevard for years now.
Right, but
And
this could be the line that's drawn.
they're trying to draw that line because basically they're about to become irrelevant.
Yeah.
That's why they're drawing that line. But if we live in a competitive market, those teams, those colleges, should be allowed to go where they want, I would say. I don't think it's healthy. But in order to sue, in order to seek restraining orders from them from meeting, I thought that was, whoa. It's a Hail Mary, I think. I think if it gets into some significant litigation, I think that they're going to lose. I think that this is a Hail Mary attempt on their part just to slow things down and try and muddy the waters. But if you were thinking about this, you might have wanted, because you're late now.
Yeah.
You're late. You're trying to stop. You're trying to stop the train that's already left the station.
Yep.
So I just thought it was interesting because I love it when they turn on each other. I really do. I love it when they turn on each other. They all been living fat for years, and now they're all starting to turn on each other. And that's a byproduct of exactly what we've been talking about on the show, with very little leadership. Nobody seems to have their hands on the wheel, and nobody seems to be able to say no.
Yep.
What would be the rationale for saying no to conference realignment? I think that there is some, but I think it's a little bit difficult legally, and that's where this thing's going to wind up. That's where this whole thing is going to wind up. So what we wanted to do today was start to go into, as we alluded to last week, start to get into some of the conferences and start to see some of the preseason polls, some of the different things that are being written and being broadcast about the different conferences and who's excited about their team this year. And also to pick up a point that we used in the previous week's show where we talked about what's happening to these power conferences. And then when we drop in Cal, Stanford, and now SMU into the Atlantic Coast Conference, I want to see what happens to some of the teams that have been struggling in their conference right now. Louisville, a vaunted basketball program. Anybody that's been around as long as I have in the basketball world, going back to Dr. Duncanstein, Denny Crum, Hall of Fame coach, Louisville, even under Pitino, Louisville was a top 15, top 25 program that now finds itself somewhere ranked in the 300s out of 364 teams. What happened? And how did that all occur? We're going to just talk about that a little bit in a little bit. But what we wanted to touch on today was some of the big conferences, who's picked, who's favored, and we're going to keep it a little bit regional today because we're going to do a little bit of Atlantic 10 coverage because I know people out here love to hear about UMass, see what's going on there. Now, this is a preseason poll is equivalent to getting a girl's phone number or getting somebody else's that you want to have an interest in romantically, getting their phone number. You're a long way from the altar. You're 30-plus games away from the altar of championship. And so preseason polls, we take them for what they're worth. And sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they're not. Generally, though, they're not really upside down. You'll generally see the coaches, the media, the people around the team who know it well, follow it, and watch it. They're pretty adept at picking this stuff because it used to be really easy. If you were doing a poll in the ACC, you would say, okay, let's close our eyes and throw dart on the board number 1, Duke. Board number 2, North Carolina. You could write that script almost every single year in the ACC for a past number of years. Changing a little bit, but we're going to see in some of the conferences, some of them are absolutely, completely upside down. And we're going to talk about that because it's really, really surprising to me. And it might be part of the NIL, but I don't think the NIL's been around long enough to have this type of impact. So the ACC right now, clear number 1 is Duke, the Blue Devils. Their recruiting is incredible. They were able to keep some of their players home. Raised close to here, did prep year close to here. Kyle Filipowski has returned to Duke. I probably had him in the top 10. Top 15 of the NBA draft had he gone. But Duke is now, again, a byproduct of the NIL, I think. This is the maybe one positive thing. is that some of the good players are allowed to stay in college a little bit longer because they're now making millions of dollars, and so that's going to help them alleviate some of the dire consequences that some of these young men are in financially. Absolutely. And it might help college basketball a little bit as well to keep some of these players in. It certainly helped with Filipowski. I think it helped with Zach Edey from Purdue as well. So Duke is pick number 1. Where we have a slide into the North Carolina Duke thing is now Miami. Jim Larinaga down at Miami. He's done a great job. Bronx native. Really kind of has the formula right now, I think. Certainly Miami, with the amount of money that's in Miami, the amount of support they have for their program, the amount of boosters that they used to have that were doing some nefarious stuff, especially in the football program. Now they can turn that all to good, and Larinaga is probably a pretty good guy for it, but he's picked number 2, and they have Norshad Ormir and Pack returning. I think they have a pretty good nucleus. I think they're going to be pretty good. Them pick number 2 does not surprise me at all. Hurricane fans can be really proud of the job that they've done there with their program. North Carolina slides in number 3. They return Armando Baycoat, and they return R.J. Davis, who's one of the best guards in the country. They have a lot returning, but we'll see if that team can refuel itself, because some of that group was involved in the national title run a couple of years before, and sometimes that great times create weak men formula starts to go. So what you have is great times create weak men create bad times create great men, and the cycle continues around and around and around. And so where are they in that great men cycle? We'll find out. Returning Armando Baycoat to campus is huge. It's huge for them because it gives them a chance. It gives them a chance to be a top 25 team for sure. I probably had him in the top 20 picks of the NBA draft if he had gone, and I think he's probably didn't hurt himself by coming back a little bit. Clemson picked number 4. That's a little surprising. They've had tremendous success in their football program. Pick number 4 because they're returning a good core of their players, and they have not really subscribed tremendously to the portal or to the NIL arrangements, where they're just trying to bring in guys from all over the place and trying to rebuild their team. They're trying to keep their team integrity together, and I think that's what you're going to see here. It's not a battle of good and evil, certainly, but it is a battle of integrity versus lack of program integrity. If you're bringing in 7, 8 new guys from the portal every single year, that's going to impact your program integrity. If you're solid and your kids are staying and they're staying out of the portal and their NIL deals are comfortable with them, you're going to be a very successful program. I think that's what you're seeing at Clemson. But what you're seeing also is you're going to look at the bottom of this league. Clemson is rising because other people are dropping like a stone. Clemson is a beneficiary of some of the other teams now that are. Louisville is picked 15th in the ACC. Louisville, one of the best programs in the country for years, now picked 15th, dead last in their area. And Kenny Payne has been there a little bit of time. He's 4-28 in his time there. They're listed in the 300s, and you would say, wow, that's not a great place for a college basketball coach to be. But then you would sit there and say, who are they going to get to turn that whole thing around? Because look at St. John's. Look at some of the programs that were vaunted in the 80s. Once you fall and once you hit the deck, not that easy to get up, because recruiting gets turned off. Other things get turned off. Your TV games aren't on because nobody wants to watch a last place team. And so there's a lot of impact that happens when you fall and you can't get up. It's like the old lady on the Life Alert commercial. Okay, programs fall, programs can't get up. And that's a situation here where you're looking at St. John's and the move to Patino, and that's going to help them and eradicate a lot of that. North Carolina State, number 5, again, another beneficiary of some program integrity and the rest of this group falling like a stone. Virginia, perennially number 1, 2, or 3 in the ACC for the past 10 years. They're listed at number 6. I don't know what's going on there in terms of their recruiting was they're never getting the best players. Tony Bennett had an incredible program, and I think that in reality, okay, in reality, if you're doing that and you're trying to keep it pretty straight, there's going to be great years and there's going to be some years that aren't so great. You have a great coach, but you're not going to be great every year because of the limitations and restrictions on your program.
Right.
When they got Ralph Sampson to go there, they took him up in a helicopter and they had written Ralph's house on the top of the gymnasium so that when he went over the top of the helicopter, he got to look down and look at Ralph's house. Now, obviously, some of those gimmicks are things of the past now with the NIL because you're not really out recruiting anybody these days. The kids aren't going to go to a school because they really like the coach. They're going to the school because it has the best dollar figure attached to it. That's why they're going. And that saddens me to no end. But West Virginia, some of those schools that are in that area where it's not, Virginia a little bit better. Charlottesville's a little south of that DM area up there, but the DC, the Maryland,
Yep.
Virginia, Northern Virginia area, a little further out from there. But again, Virginia Tech, some of those schools, it's not great recruiting base, and it's a little bit more difficult for them to sign players. Additionally, Virginia has very high academic standards. Virginia has, for years, held to those academic standards. And so where you'll see other players being admitted to other schools in that same conference, their coaching staff are told probably to stay away from some of those young men because of the number of different schools they attend, the GPAs that swing and vary, and of course, now you have some of the SAT testing or the ACT testing that is now out the window, but I don't know if it's out the window with the NCAA right now. I think that's still part of the formula. So you have Wake Forest, picked 7th, again, not a perennial top half team, and some of these teams are beneficiaries of the bottom because now we're going to read you the bottom. Pittsburgh, Jeff Capel, he's under contract till like 2027, and if he wasn't, he'd have been fired a long time ago, my opinion. But sometimes by waiting and by virtue of the exorbitant amount of money that was remaining on his contract, which would have been necessary to buy out that contract, you now have to either muddy the waters and cite that you're firing your coach for cause, or you're going to pay him. And so when you have somebody under contract till 2027, it's the year 2023, and you got 4 years at we just alluded to it, $3 or $4 million, people are going to start to shake their head when they hear $12, $15 million to get rid of a basketball coach and then hire a new one.
Right.
Okay, so Capel, I think he could be a beneficiary, but under normal circumstances, his resume, what he's done at Pitt, talk about a portal. They're the Pittsburgh Portals. They've had guys in the portal at a greater degree than probably any program, and it shows. So Boston College, the Eagle fans, very excited not to be 15th anymore. I mean, this is a program. Gene DiFilippo, the AD, took them into the ACC, and they have not been relevant in any sport since. Rutgers was moved into the Big Ten. They have no longer remained any relevance. Not that Rutgers was ever relevant anywhere before, but I never understood. I know there's a Catholic association with the Big East, but I never understood why the Big East didn't open up to Rutgers and bring them in. Rutgers obviously wasn't really looking for the Big East because they were trying to take their football program up, and the Big Ten could handle the football program. The Big East football is non-existent. So that's a lot of like we say, when football's running the things, you know. But nice to see Boston College get picked 10th. I don't know that they have it to be 10th, but we'll find out. Adrian Autry, new coach at Syracuse, coming in, dropping the 2-3 zone. I was an assistant coach on the Malloy team, and we played Tollentine for the city championship. That was Kenny Anderson matched up against Red Adrian Autry, now the coach at Syracuse. And that was, to me, I've been around a long time, that's one of the best guard matchups I've ever seen. I had the best seat in the house for it, and it was an unbelievable game. Tollentine knocked us off and won the city title that day with Malik Sealy, God rest his soul, Brian Reese, Adrian Autry. That was a really, really good high school basketball team. And I'll be excited to see Red take over. I hope some of his demeanor carries over onto their team, because that will be necessary. And it's already, I think, taking a little bit place because he said he's bagging Jim Boeheim's 2-3 zone, where everybody in the Western tier, everybody in the Syracuse area should be celebrating. Champagne corks should be popping all over Syracuse to say goodbye to that ugly 2-3 zone that they sat in every single night for the last 10 years, regardless of the type of talent they had. I don't like coaches that go in with a set. I'm a 2-3 zone every time. Well, what if you have a really good athletic team that can play man-to-man? What if you have a really good team that you can turn and turn your defense into offense, and you're just sitting them in a 2-3 zone? I never got it. I never really was a big Boeheim fan for his coaching acumen either. Florida State picked number 12. I've seen some reports where Leonard Hamilton could be under consideration, under some trouble. I think that's a mishit. I think Leonard Hamilton does a great job at Florida State. I think he's a great role model for those young men that have attended Florida State. Look at the pro ranks, Scotty Barnes. There's a number of different, Devin Vassell. There's a number of different Florida State players that are doing very, very well in the NBA right now. And Florida State's not a perennial basketball power. They're a football school. And so for Leonard Hamilton to accomplish what he has accomplished there, I think you buy him a little time instead of being so rabid about it. He can turn that thing around and get him going. I think I'd be interested to see. But they didn't have a great year last year. They're picked 12th this year. That's how college basketball works. 13th, Georgia Tech. Alluded to Kenny Anderson, my guy before, the Lethal Weapon 3 team they had, Dennis Scott, Brian Oliver. Man, they've fallen. Georgia Tech has fallen, and they're really having trouble getting up. I don't understand why, because Atlanta is such a hot city. Atlanta's got a great basketball area for being into any of the southern states. And Georgia Tech has a great reputation. I really can't understand it. I think they've made some poor coaching choices recently, and I think that happens a lot. I think St. John's did the same thing. They made some really poor choices as far as coaches go. Jim Larrañaga would have ran to St. John's. The head coach at Miami, when he was at Bowling Green or George Mason, he would have picked up his entire family and jogged to St. John's for the St. John's job. They hire some guy like Mike Jarvis. Bob McKillop, the great Davidson coach, he would have walked backwards to St. John's at any time in his career when he was a young coach. They never, ever went near Bob McKillop. And two of those gentlemen would have been absolutely great fits for them. And then they went to Fran Fraschilla, Mike Jarvis, Mike Anderson. You have to know New York to be a St. John's coach. You have to know New York. And Larrañaga was born in the Bronx. And McKillop is a Queens guy, Long Island guy, with a tremendous coaching reputation. St. John's walked away from both of those guys because they wanted to win the headline of the New York Post. They listed Calipari's name. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. Calipari, when he was at Memphis, was showing some interest in the St. John's job. But when years ago, St. John's, with the head coach Lou Carnesecca, was in a recruiting battle supposedly for a really good player. And John Calipari was assistant coach at Pitt. And John Calipari told the recruit something about Lou Carnesecca that was absolutely untrue. And it was an attempt to try and get the kid to come to school at Pittsburgh. And to this day, Lou Carnesecca never forgot about it. And so when Calipari was floating his name in the New York Post, I can guarantee you that Louis put on his shoes, put on his hat, walked across Queens Boulevard and said, that's not happening. And that's where they wound up with some of the coaches that they wound up with. But now the move to Pitino is a very solid move. But Georgia Tech, again, man, they've fallen. To be 13th in the ACC, they're just getting eaten up by their own people that are in the ACC. 14, Notre Dame. Notre Dame has 5-6 scholarship players returning. They've just turned over coaches. Now they've got a whole new staff, and they're moving in a different direction. But Notre Dame, 15th in the ACC. They have no relevancy. They're one of the best football teams in the country, one of the biggest money-producing football teams in the country. Their bookstore probably makes $1.5 million every Saturday. Their bookstore probably makes $2 million every Saturday. Can't get their basketball program off the floor. And again, where's their area? You're in Indiana. Indiana's basketball state.
Sure, yeah.
Indiana is full of talent. You have surrounding areas of Michigan and Detroit, the cities of Detroit and some of those areas, Chicago. Really, really rich basketball talent around there. Again, choices. You're making the wrong choices with some of their coaching stuff, and they've made some of their wrong choices about this other stuff as well. Louisville picked 15th. That's sad. Here's their top 5 players, a couple of the players in the league that I think are of mention. Number 1, Armando Bacot. We mentioned him from North Carolina. Big man, solid inside. Needs to really improve his skill set if he wants to be a solid NBA player. He's going to have to improve his shooting, going to have to improve his all-court game in order to be an NBA player. Right now, he's a big man. In college basketball, a lot like Jarace Walker, a lot like some of the other people that we talked about in last year's draft, that when you make that connection to the NBA, everybody in the NBA is just big like you. Everybody in the NBA has the same physical attributes that you have. There's guards in the NBA that have the same physical attributes as Armando Bacot. So if Armando Bacot wants to have any chance other than getting shuffled off to Marrakesh or some European country, he really has to improve his all-court game. Norshad Ormir, that's a gentleman who's at Miami. I think his game is much more suited for NBA talent. I would, if we did our draft right now, I'd say Norshad Ormir, if he entered his name into the draft, would probably be in the top 15, 17 picks right now. I'm really high on this young man. Number 3, this guy I like the most in the ACC. Again, he prepped over at Wilbraham and Munson. I got a chance to see him up close. I saw his AAU team a couple of times. Kyle Filipowski from Duke, he returns. And that's what's making everybody so excited about Duke, is that Filipowski's back. He's one of the best big men in the country. UConn fans are very, very fortunate to have Donovan Clingan. You have Zach Edey. There's some good big men in college basketball this year. You might see the resurgence of the big in college basketball this year. P.J. Hall at Clemson is one of the reasons that Clemson's considered as high as they are. And R.J. Davis out of Archbishop Stepinac in New York City, I believe. And he's a good player. I've never been stuck on him as a North Carolina point guard, though, because I think one of the things that you have in the point guard scenario, we talked about NBA centers a little bit. Well, point guard scenario is a little bit the same, where it's a little bit of a binary, where you have an A and you have a B. The A point guard is a point guard who doesn't look to score. He runs your team. He distributes the ball. He probably is one of the leading assist leaders in your league and one of the assist leaders in the country if he's good enough. It's a thankless job. It's a thankless job. B is the Allen Iverson model. The point guard who can score points, dominates the ball, keeps control of it, doesn't have to have a lot of other great complementary players around him because he's so dominating. But that's the 2 prototype models. You don't see too much more than that. And what you have in the middle is what coaches refer to as combo. Combo means he could play a little bit of point guard and he can play a little bit of 2 guard. Means he shoots it pretty good. Allen Iverson, his size probably dictated him as a point guard, but there are some people out there that you might consider to be a combo guard. When I hear combo guard, that tells me he's not a 1 or a 2.
Utility.
He's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I don't want him, because I like people that have role definition in my program. I like people that know what we expect them to do. I prefer the prototype model A for point guard play. I think it works best. That's what I prefer. Right now, you're seeing all sorts of different teams have different approaches to that. R.J. Davis is a combo. He's not a point guard. He's not big enough and strong enough to play a 2. They lost Caleb Love out to Arizona, I believe, who was a player returning for them. So we'll see how that offense flows this year, because Love was a real high-volume scorer. We'll see how that goes. All right, ACC is done, Pete. Let's skip to the Big Ten.
All right.
Big Ten, with the big man, with the big-time game, Zach Edey, Purdue, pick number 1. I alluded to this. I'm going to stand by it. You look at Virginia, when they lost to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, the only time a 16 seed has ever clipped a number 1 seed. Tony Bennett was the coach. You can't get any better than Tony Bennett. Okay? So if it can happen to Tony Bennett, coaches, don't take your losses so seriously. It could happen to anybody. And so what happened to Virginia the following year is they came back redirected, ready to go, fired up, and won the national title. Now, I don't know that Zach Edey has the requisite pieces around him right now to make that happen. But if you got a 7'4" big man who comes back 260 pounds, and he's averaging 22 and 15, and now has a chip on his shoulder. I like produced chances. I like produced chances. Michigan State picked number 2. Tom Izzo is one of my all-time favorites because when Tom Izzo goes to recruit, Tom Izzo's like me in the shopping market. Tom Izzo's like me in the Big Y. I spend 15 minutes in the Big Y tops anytime I go in there because I know exactly what I'm shopping for. If you send my wife and daughter into the Big Y, they could be in there for an hour and a half. The difference is I'm only going in to shop for the things that I absolutely need right at that moment. That's Tom Izzo's recruiting style. He's shopping for the needs that he has at that particular moment. He gets them to work, he gets them to go, and he has one of the best operations as far as team preparation and scouting preparation that's ever been assembled in college basketball, and it matters. What they're looking at is how do you blow up the other team's offense, and nobody is better at that in a half-court situation than Tom Izzo, in my opinion. Kevin Willard out at Maryland. I like Kevin Willard a lot as a young coach. I thought he did a very good job at Seton Hall. He's the coach's son. His dad was the head coach at Holy Cross. His dad was the head coach at other places. He was coach's son. But I really like him as a coach because there's a lot of guys who've been coach's sons that didn't quite grab it the way that this young man grabs it. And so the people down at Maryland, they lost their big man, I know, and they thought they were going to get Dickinson, to come when he left Michigan. They lost that thing. Had they gotten him, you're talking about them being in the top 10 possibly. So he makes Kansas number 1. I don't know what he would have done for Maryland. Number 4, Illinois. They returned Terrence Shannon, returned some other good pieces. They've underachieved in the past couple of years. So if this doesn't go well, I think you're going to see their head coach is one of the guys who might be on the hot seat, Mr. Underwood. Iowa listed number 5. Fran McCaffrey does an absolute great job with this team. I know Coach McCaffrey from earlier days when he was a head coach at Siena. He did very, very well at Siena and launched himself to a great job at Iowa. Many people thought he would go back and take the Notre Dame job if it was available because I believe his wife is a Notre Dame graduate. But what he's done at Iowa is nothing short of absolutely miraculous. Their program is tremendous. Year in and year out, he's sending players to the pros. And again, we've alluded to the recruiting advantage. There are no basketball players within 500 miles of Iowa. Not a lot of really good ones. And so he's really done well keeping players home in the state who might be pretty good players, but also adding some guys to that mix that are really, really good. I love the job he's done there. It's not an easy job, and he's really, really accomplished a great deal. To keep Iowa in the top end of that Big Ten is a basketball power above Ohio State, above Indiana. I think he's done a great job. So now you got Wisconsin, number 6. Again, Greg Gard. I like him because he's a former Division III coach. Hot seat. He's going to be on it a little bit if they don't do well. Part of the problem is that they had a coach there, Bo Ryan, many, many years, did a great job, created a program. It's going to be like who takes over for Gonzaga after Mark Few. Who's going to take that job and do better than this guy did?
Right.
And this is kind of what the guy at Wisconsin's up against because their fan base, their booster base thinks they should be in the Final Four every single year. And again, Wisconsin isn't exactly loaded with players.
Right.
And you have Marquette in the same state who has a much better basketball reputation than Wisconsin does. And I think it's a difficult job, and I think the guy's done a great job there. Anybody who says that he shouldn't be the head coach at Wisconsin, I think they're crazy. And then tell me at that same moment, who's the guy that you're going to get to replace him that's better? Because that's a question they should ask a lot of these ADs before they say, hey, our boosters are upset, our boosters are fired up, we're going to fire the head coach. The next question is going to be, who do you have? Who's better than this guy? Because so many times they just fire the head coach and the guy was, for different reasons, might have been struggling at the time. Who knows? But they fire the guy and wind up in worse position than they were
Yeah,
before.
the better question is who's going to come there?
Right.
Like, you could say you want somebody, but it doesn't mean they're going to come or they're going to knock on your door.
You know, it was like Fordham University years ago when they were looking for a basketball coach. They started out, it was like an old Maxwell Smart episode when this guy had a gun on Maxwell Smart and he says, "This building's surrounded by 3,000 federal agents." And the guy goes, "Yeah, I don't believe that." Holds the gun on him. And by the time Maxwell Smart gets down,
Would
he's
you
like,
believe?
"I have 2 Boy Scouts and a seeing eye dog outside." You know?
Right.
And-
Now,
and-
would you
and-
believe?
Exactly. You know, and so it's kind of the same thing, you know, to me with this. But, you know, let's see where it falls. Here we go again. Where we're talking about conferences. Big Ten now has 14 teams. You might want to think about a name change there, Big Ten. But you go to Ohio State. Oh, my God. How are they in the 7 hole? How are they in spot 7? It's a good question. It's a football school, I understand that, but they have a great basketball area. They have all the resources to be a top 25 program, and for some reason they've really, really struggled recently. Bobby Knight's Indiana program at 8. Again, this is what I'm talking about some of these conferences flipped upside down. If you told me 20 years ago Purdue's going to be the power conference of the Big Ten, power in the conference of the Big Ten, and Indiana is going to be 8th, I'd say you're crazy. You're crazy. But this is exactly what's happened. Northwestern, Coach Collins, maybe they have a year 9th. That's a lot for them. They're excited about 9th. You know, nobody ever talks about them in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. You know, they're just in 9th. You know, and they're excited about being 9th because they are a big conference catfish. They're just waiting to see what falls to the bottom of the tank, and they're going to eat up everything that falls to the bottom of the tank, meaning dollars. Profit sharing, all of the money that those real teams that are spending all of their money and all of their expenses on their program are winning, and Northwestern sits there and eats it up. And so Rutgers, a little bit of the same thing. They're in the 10 hole. They brought their football program in there. They have zero. I think it's in the negative right now, relevance in basketball, football, any of the reasons that they joined the Big Ten. They have zero relevance in those areas. And very easily could be playing on the East Coast, saving all those plane trips, saving all of those field hockey players that have to now go to Michigan and fly, stay overnight, miss class, do this. What you did was you took your football program and extrapolated it out to every single one of your sports. All of the maladies, all of the problems that you were having in your football program are now extrapolated out to every single one of your sports. You did it for money. We get it. But you didn't do it for the student athlete. And so that's the piece of it, that pomp and circumstance that everybody stands on and says, "Oh, we're here for the student athletes." Give me a break. You're here for the money. Let's just call it like it is. You'd sell your grandmother down the river for a contract. Let's just be honest. Okay, so Penn State, number 11. Their coaches came, gone. He was there for a year or two. Now he's at Notre Dame. Again, zero basketball relevance for years and years and years. Their football program is $50, $75 million operation every year. Nebraska at 12, nobody cares about basketball there. Nobody now cares about football there. They took their football program, which was once one of the finest in the entire country, and now they can't get across the goal line. So I'm unsure of how that all occurred down there. You know, maybe they got a president who didn't like all of the shenanigans and tried to squeeze it, and now you're not operating at that same level. Mm-hmm. Minnesota picked last. They fired Richard Pitino. Again, you wanted to get rid of Richard Pitino, who had everything moving pretty good. Richard Pitino moves over to New Mexico and is doing pretty good, and Minnesota now is flat on their back in the 14th spot. Do they care? I don't know. Does anybody care in Minnesota about that? I don't know. It's not a great talent base. It's not a great job.
Isn't Minnesota known for its wrestling program?
They're known for wrestling. Football, they have a good football program from time to time.
Yep.
You know, they will do that. But it's just, to me, it's again, you had all this heat on your coach. What did you think you were? You know, he had them in the middle of the pack, which is higher than they've ever been before. But now you're going to say, okay, we need a new coach. We need this. We need that. Texas fired Rick Barnes, Shaka Smart, and guess where they're picked right now? Rick Barnes, we're going to cover the SEC in a minute. They're
Dead
picked
last.
first in their country. They're picked first in their conference with Rick Barnes. And Marquette's picked in the top of the Big East with Shaka Smart. And now they had to fire the guy that they hired because allegedly put his hands on a woman, and now go to an interim coach in the middle, and now tell me how good you're doing. Tell me that you guys had a good design on this thing, because they're going to float enough money to keep it going. But a place like St. John's, a place like some of those places that don't have all that resource, that don't have all that state money, you're going to fall, and it's going to be really difficult to get up. Minnesota, I don't think they're getting up for a while anyway. Zach Edey's one of the best players in the conference, if not the country. Terrence Shannon. Here's a guy I'm really high on for the NBA draft. Nobody knows his name. I want to throw his name out there to general managers right now. Julian Reese from Maryland is a very, very good player, and I have him listed pretty high as a pro prospect. He's big, tall, can really run, can do a lot of stuff, and he plays with an intensity level that I really, really like. So I want to just put his name out there. Zed Key from Ohio State, and then you have the young man Holgard from Michigan State, who's very good. SEC, this might be the best basketball conference in the country right now. Might be the absolute best basketball conference right now. You see tremendous turnover with some of their teams going into the NBA, some of their players going into the NBA. But if they pick Arkansas fourth, after all of that, the drafting that went on with 4 of their players wound up in the first round. That's pretty good. Maybe 4 of their players wound up drafted, several of them in the first round. And if they can maintain that after losing all of that, Coach Musselman's got it going. He's got the Rolodex going, and he's got this thing on speed dial. But they go to number 1 again. Texas wanted to get rid of this guy. This gentleman, Rick Barnes, is one of the top guys in our business. And Texas ran him out the door. Tennessee, I love the way Tennessee's been playing under Rick Barnes as well. And now they're picked number 1 in probably the best conference in the country. Buzz Williams, Texas A&M, he's a good coach. I really like watching his teams play. And, again, program integrity. He's keeping his guys together. A couple of additions here and there, but Texas A&M's got some money too. So if they ever get into an NIL deal and he finds a couple of those oil guys down in Texas and Oklahoma that are real interested in making their program be great, that's when it's really going to start cooking down at Texas A&M, I believe. Auburn, Bruce Pearl, picked number 3. Never got him much as a coach, to be honest with you. He's one of those guys, takes his shirt off and paints himself orange and goes into the student section. And when he was at Tennessee, I just never got him as a coach. He's one of those guys that was NIL probably a little bit before the NIL, and so I love to see this stuff catch up with them. But right now, Auburn picked 3rd. Arkansas picked 4th. Really good job by Coach Musselman to maintain where they're at, because that's hard to do if you lose that much talent in 1 year. And you're going to see, have you ever heard of Texas A&M being in the top of the basketball conference?
No.
Mississippi State is picked 4th. Mississippi is picked 6th. This conference completely upside down. This is from the way that it used to be. As we keep reading here, you're going to be like, oh, my God. Here we go. Number 8. Now, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more heat on Calipari at Kentucky than there is right now. And I'm going to say that because they don't play any defense. And people in Kentucky love good basketball. And I'm surprised that after watching Pitino coach there and some of the other coaches they've had there, that there isn't more heat on Calipari. Because right now, they're struggling. The number 1 program in the country is struggling. And so if you go back to a reference that I made also, John Calipari vacated a Final Four at UMass. John Calipari vacated a Final Four at Memphis and now has arguably the best job in the country. Say it again. 2 vacated Final Fours and has the best job in the country.
So you want to go,
They didn't vacate those Final Fours because he was playing well with others.
Right.
Okay? And so now you say, okay, he has the best job in the country. What does that say to you about our entire operation as NCAA basketball? Just that one little snippet. What does that say to you? It's staggering what it says to me. It's saddening what it says to me. But again, he's picked 8th. And if they have another year that's like the years that they've had, where they're not, because you want to talk about reference point. We reference Wisconsin. You want to talk about reference point. Kentucky thinks they should be number 1 every single year. And every minute that they're not number 1 is angst. and Dern and Strong and wind and fog, and it's all terrible down there. That they won't be able to see the top of the bluegrass. They'll be buried under so much of this stuff. Bottom line is they're picked eighth. Florida's picked ninth. Two of the most vaunted programs in SEC history now are upside down, staring up at Mississippi, staring up at Mississippi State in basketball. It's unbelievable. Kobe Brown leaving Missouri is going to leave a mark. He was a great player, program integrity, 4-year guy. That's been a difficult job. They got jammed up with Quinn Snyder and some of those guys years ago. Again, really, really difficult job because Missouri, it's a tough place to get into. It's like Montana. It's very isolated. There's not a lot of basketball talent there. So I think it's a better football school than it is basketball, but for some reason, they've been all right. They've been all right to stay relevant a little bit. Jerry Stackhouse, I'm going to put him down as another guy who is going to be getting a little bit of attention at the end of the year as a coach. I think if he doesn't do well, he's picked 11th. And sometimes this is what I say to some of my friends, and I'm going to send it out there as an advice to everybody else. Some of the people, because they have a difficult time controlling themselves on social media. Go home and chop off all 10 of your fingers so that you can't type. Because Jerry Stackhouse went one time and took out the entire fan base of Vanderbilt on a tweet and called all of them just some terrible, terrible stuff and still survived to coach there this day. Vanderbilt's never been a great basketball program. It's listed in Tennessee. Memphis is a better basketball program than them. But I think one of the things that's happening here is you're never going to be able to compete with the rest of these teams, even the ones that have fallen, if you're Vanderbilt. It's never going to happen. Does Stackhouse draw some attention this year and receive some scrutiny as for where the program's gone? It's been a mess, to be honest with you. And if he didn't have that North Carolina pro pedigree, I think he'd be gone already. But I keep an eye on him. All right, LSU, Will Wade is calling from McNeese State for his job back. He says, all of these guys did exactly what I did, and you guys fired me and kept everybody in place and then put in the NIL, which I kind of invented. So if I'm Will Wade, I'm pissed off. I'm upset if I'm Will Wade. I'm going out there and saying, hey, give me my job back, LSU. And they might want to because now they're 12th. At least we'll wait at them in the top 3. Let's not cast aspersions about how they got to the top 3. But if everybody in the conference is doing it, then he's just doing it better than they are.
Right.
So that's the way I look at it. Somebody dropped on him. Somebody wanted him gone, in my opinion. Georgia, 13th. And it breaks my heart to even list number 14, but again, program that has fallen and can't get up in the Frank McGuire years. South Carolina, 14th. The Gamecocks, what a basketball history, what a basketball program they've had. Right now, Frank Martin, who's the coach at UMass, was just dismissed, brought in a new coach. Why did they get rid of Frank Martin? I really don't understand that, because they were bad way, way before Frank Martin. And so your reference point of years and years ago with Frank McGuire and some of the New York pipeline that they had established there is Moby Dick was a minnow the last time that went on. So you need to reevaluate your reference point as a program. You need to figure things out and say, okay, we haven't been there in 25 years. We got to stop blaming all the coaches and start to look at what it is that's holding us back. And in part, what's holding some of them back is resources. All right, let's go to the Big East, Pete. We're running out. I told you this was going to be the fastest hour, but I want to get to the Big East and I want to get to the A-10, and I think we can do it. Big East, I've alluded to this gentleman on our show. I love McDermott down at Creighton. I think he is one of the best basketball offensive minds in the business. To be able to do what they're doing talent-wise in Nebraska is nothing short of amazing. He's a really good coach to be picked first in the Big East. Again, let's go back and review our conference realignment cheat sheet, okay? Big East
right.
has Nebraska.
Right.
Okay, we're going to keep rolling through here, too. You're going to hear Big East. Now, number 2 has Marquette. Marquette's located in Wisconsin, in case anybody was interested. As far as I know, that's not on the East Coast.
Nope.
UConn Huskies picked number 3. Danny Hurley is one of the hottest young coaches in the game right now. I love the stuff that they're doing on offense. He kind of like McDermott, and again, come out of the coaching pedigree. The dad was the number one guy in the state of New Jersey forever. He's the dean of New Jersey basketball. His brother's the coach at Arizona State, played at Duke. He played at Seton Hall. So they've been in the gym their entire lives. They know this stuff. But that doesn't always translate into the coaching business.
Correct.
And one of the things that is really, really, I was happy to hear him say this too, because we should all listen to our wives a little bit more. And Pete, you're newly engaged. Man, I'm going to drop that one on you right before you get to the altar. We should all listen to our wives a little bit more, because they have our best interest at heart. And one of the things that changed completely for Danny Hurley, if you've seen his sideline demeanor, was his wife kind of talking to him about the way he was acting on the sidelines and behaving, and how it was a detriment to his basketball team. And when he heard that, coming from the person that's closest to him in life, he took notice and he made changes. And I like guys that make changes. I like guys that are capable of change. Danny Hurley, we're watching you, buddy, and we're proud of you, because it's not an easy business. The pressure can really get to you. And now that you've won the national title, you just do what you do best, because you've got a really good basketball mind. And so don't let all the other external stuff get to you. Just stay in the frame. Your dad was the best. I knew your dad, and I loved him, and he was the best. And he was a disciplinarian, and that was important for those programs. And this is St. Anthony's in New Jersey that never, ever had a home basketball gymnasium. They would win games on the road. They would play 30 games on the road and win every single one of them. And he was just an intense gentleman on the sidelines. But that intensity was a little bit of a teddy bear, too, because if one of his players needed him, boy, was he right there for him. And that's what I loved about Coach Hurley. And Bobby and Danny are both kind of mirror images of the dad. But right now, Danny, I'm proud of the changes that you made. I'll just say that, from one coach to another. I wish sometimes I could make some great changes as a coach, too. I try. I don't know if I'm always successful. Villanova, number 4. I think this is a little high for Villanova. I think the Big East is hoping Villanova is number 4. They have another program, I think, that's ready to go into that fall and I can't get up zone. I hate to say it. I love Villanova. They've been a vaunted and an important part of the college basketball scene for many, many years. But when you lose Jay Wright, and you grab a guy that's coached for only 1 year in college basketball and give him one of the best jobs, but also one of the most difficult jobs. Villanova is not a basketball power. They don't have football. They've made their bones in basketball being an amazingly well-coached team and finding the right players to fit their system. Jalen Brunson, some of those other players. If you go back and look at Jay Wright's recruiting classes, he wasn't getting the great players that were out there. It's funny, because I was at the Hoop Hall Classic with him one time, and we're watching a basketball game, and it's me and him just sitting there in the coaches section. And it's funny. He's like the number one guy, and here's me, a D3 guy, and he's sitting with me, and because I knew him from New York a little bit too, but he's sitting with me and having a conversation that was unbelievable. And all of a sudden, the number one player in the nation, who was playing at the Hoop Hall, walks by, shakes his hand and says, "Coach, how you doing? Love it." And I said to him, "Wow, Coach, that guy, he really thinks a lot of you. You got a good chance with him?" He goes, "We have no shot." He goes, "They love me. They come over, they shake my hand, but we have no shot with him." And the young man wound up signing with Calipari down at Memphis. So you figure the rest of that out. Okay. Xavier, number 5. Zach Fremantle back. I really like Miller as the coach. I think he's an intense guy. Again, his dad was a longtime coach. I think he's really, really tough. I think they're going to be okay. St. John's picked number 6. Don't believe it. Do not believe it. St. John's will be in the top 3 in that league this year. Joel Soriano, transfer from Fordham, played there last year. Wait till Pitino molds this young man. Wait till Pitino coaches this young man. You're going to see him emerge as we're going to watch him next year in our draft. He'll be a top 20 pick in our draft after Pitino gets done with him. I'll guarantee that. Joel Soriano. Remember, we said it here. Number 6, way too low. Providence at 7, way too high. They got problems out there. They lost Ed Cooley. They're going to have some issues competing with the rest of the league, and now they've grabbed a coach from George Mason that had been there for a very short period of time. To me, did not really excel when he was at George Mason, and so he's hired at Providence. I don't know why, but I think they're going to struggle a little bit. I think they made a big mistake there. Seton Hall at number 8. If you look at what's happened around Seton Hall, it's amazing to me, I guess because they have the Meadowlands and they play in the Garden sometimes with St. John's. It's amazing to me that Seton Hall can compete at the level they do in basketball. It really is amazing to me. That, to me, is the most difficult job in the entire Big East. And maybe the most difficult job in all of the power conferences. I know that says a lot, but I think that's why I like Willard as much, because he did so well there with a program that I think is just terrible. To list Seton Hall above 8 and then say Georgetown is number 9, I don't think Georgetown stays 9 for very long. I think Ed Cooley will get it figured out quickly. DePaul and Butler, I've fallen and I can't get up. I've fallen and I can't get up. DePaul was a Final Four team back in the day. I was a huge DePaul fan with Coach Meyer and all the guys. They've fallen and they can't get up. Where's DePaul? They're located in Chicago. They're not in the Big East.
Right.
Butler, where are they located? They're in Indiana, not in the Big East. Okay, Pete, I think we're out of time.
Yes, we are.
All right. I promise I'll bring you the A10 back next week, but the thing with the A10 has been all over the place. I'm seeing, one team listed 2nd, then I'm seeing them listed 10th. So what we're going to do is we're going to add up 10 and 2, and we're going to divide by 2. They're probably a 6th. I'm talking about my St. Bonaventure Bonnies right there. But again, we're in a zone. And we're going to fly from here, folks, because this college basketball season is going to be amazing, and we're excited about it, and we're glad that you're excited with us. We love Hoopers, and we love you guys. Stay with us. And again, Miss Donna, you got to get better. I'm staying off Pinot Grigio until I get to Emma's and I have one with you. I will not have another Pinot Grigio till I'm back at the bar with you. I love you. Stay well.